chapter 1, verses 12 through 16 again. 1 Timothy chapter 1, 12 through 16. We are studying the book on grace by Dan Winkler called Simply Incredible, Incredibly Simple. We're in our 5th week, and we are discussing the showcase of grace. Last week we talked about Rahab and her being a harlot, a prostitute, where she come from, and then how she is one of 2 women listed in what we call the Hall of Fame of Faith, or Hebrews 11. We're talking about the next 3 weeks about where people come from, how they were impacted by grace, and where they're going now. And this week, we're going to talk about Samson, and we're going to talk about Mary Magdalene. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 12 through 16. Can someone get that? 1 Timothy 1, 12 through 16.
And I thank you, Christ Jesus, our Lord, who has enabled me, because he counted me faithful, putting me into the ministry. Although I was formerly a blasphemer and persecutor, an insolent man, but I have attained mercy because I did it ignorantly in unbelief. And the grace of our Lord was exceedingly abundant with faith and love, which are in Christ Jesus. This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptance, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the chief. However, for this reason I obtained mercy, that in me first Jesus Christ might show all long-suffering as a pattern to those who are going to believe on him for everlasting life.
So we looked at this verse last week, and we looked at what Paul said he was, a blasphemer, insolent person. This week, let's look at verse 15. What does he say he is a sinner? What kind of sinner? The worst, the chief, the worst sinner. Now turn to our memory verse, 1 Corinthians 15:10. I am what I am because of what? But for the what? Grace. Now look at 15:9. 1 Corinthians 15:9. Someone read that. First Corinthians 15:9.
For I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God.
So Paul is the least, the worst sinner, and what is he of the apostles? The best apostle? The least apostle. So Paul describes himself as blasphemer, insolent, the worst of the sinners, the chiefest sinner. He's worse than David, Killen. He's worse than Jeremy Hood. He's worse than anybody. If he was here walking with us, he would put himself lower than us. And yet, him being apostle, what does he say? All these men are what? Greater than me. Does that put in perspective verse 10? A little bit more? I'm horrible. I'm worse. I'm the worst. I'm the least. Yet verse 10 says what? Our memory verse, I am what I am, but for the grace of God. So catch verse 15 there, verse 15 as well. Why did Jesus come? Seek and save who? What does that mean to you, Miss Betty? What does that mean? Us. Paul's writing it with the inspired word, right? Means everybody. So this Apostle Paul, who we read about, who we think what a great person Apostle Paul is. All of us would love to talk to him today, right? Ask him a lot of questions. This man says, I'm pathetic. This is who I was. Yet, I'm confident in this grace because Jesus come to this earth to seek and save me. It's pretty humbling, ain't it? Today we're going to talk about Samson. We're going to talk about Mary Magdalene. But first, we're going to talk about two Davids. Dan's going to talk about two Davids. He's going to talk about their families, their frustrations, their failures, their faith, and their future.
This is a tale of two Davids. One David, a dear friend, died recently. The other David lived a long, long time ago. Almost 3,000 years separated these two men, but they were alike in many ways. Both were farmers. One raised crops, one raised animals, sheep to be specific. Both left the farm to do something else. One ran a co-op, one ran a country, the nation of Israel. Both were hurt by life. One lost a brother, one lost a friend that was closer than a brother. Both were touched and dramatically changed by the grace of God, and that's why we're here to talk about them. The David I knew wasn't a Christian when we first met, but over the years, a friendship blossomed that blessed my life in so many ways. The other David was, well, one most of us have known since we were boys and girls in Bible school. You know, David as in David and Goliath. The name David means beloved. And I'd like for us to see why our two Davids not only lived up to their name, but why they might be seen as special trophies in what we're calling the showcase of God's grace. I want you to think with me about their families, their frustrations, their failures, their faith, and their future. 5 comparisons. Here's comparison number 1, their families. The David I knew was born to a great Christian family in Cottondale, Alabama, outside of Tuscaloosa. He had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. 2 brothers, Edward and Dee, grew in their faith and became leaders in the church where they worshiped. Another brother, Wallace, became a missionary. But the David I knew didn't become a Christian until later in life. He was a man of integrity and moral excellence, but never gave himself to the Lord. David of the Bible also came from a wonderful family. His great-great-grandmother was Rahab, the heathen prostitute of Jericho, that converted to a deep faith in God. His daddy, Jesse, had 8 sons, and 4 of them served their country in the military. Now fast forward. Guess who else you'll find in David's family? Matthew 1 tells us that Jesus was a son of David. Great families. Comparison number 2, their frustrations. The David I know, or the David I knew, was especially tight with his brother Dee, one of those brothers that served in the leadership of his home church. Their families traveled together, vacationed together, and well, they just loved being together. David and Dee were buddies. But sadly, after a routine surgery, Dee unexpectedly died from a heart attack. So here was a non-Christian David extremely close to a very strong Christian Dee, and when that strong Christian died, my non-Christian friend David couldn't understand. He became angry, frustrated, mad at God. David of the Bible had his own frustrations. He lived in King Saul's palace and became the best friend of Saul's son, Jonathan. The Bible tells us that Jonathan loved David as he loved his own soul, 1 Samuel 18:1. In time, Saul came to resent David and tried to kill him. What have I done? David asked Jonathan. What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? 1 Samuel 20, 1-3. David finally had to run away. I can't help but think if some of that went through his mind when he penned Psalm 13, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Comparison number 3, their failures. The David I knew lost one of the strongest influences for good in his life, leaving him disappointed, discouraged, angry with God. Becoming a Christian, being a Christian, out of the question. And that's how he chose to live. He was a good man, a good husband, a good father. But he was mad at God, and it wouldn't do to talk to him about becoming a Christian. And he lived that way for almost 20 years. David of the Bible made his own mistakes, and they were whoppers. He spied on a beautiful naked woman taking a bath. He called her to his palace, led her into his bedchamber, and well, I don't think I have to spell out the rest. That one-night fling resulted in a pregnancy. And if that's not bad enough, the woman's husband was one of David's best soldiers. The man's name was Uriah. The woman's name was Bathsheba, as in bath, taking a bath, Sheba. I'm sure you know the rest of the story. Uriah was assassinated as a government cover-up, and David tried to hide the whole mess. Comparison number 4, their faith. The David I knew struggled to become a Christian. For 9 years, we would visit and talk about his journey of faith. I made him a promise. I'd never push him to become a Christian. With God's patience, one night, I went to visit. I knew he was getting close to making a decision, so I took a piece of baling twine with me. I tied one end of it to a belt loop on my blue jeans and stuck the other end in my pocket. It looked like a watch chain. Remember, he worked at our co-op, and I bought hay from him. That's where the twine came from. Before I left that night, I took the twine. Later, he told me he had seen it and was wondering what it was all about. So I took it, and I put it on the den table, and I used it as an illustration. I said, you know, if you push this string across the table, it just bunches up and makes a mess. If you gently pull it, it'll go wherever you choose for it to go. I told him I'd promised not to push him, but I was there to do a little pulling. Within 24 hours, I was blessed to baptize my friend and rejoice in his coming to Jesus. He kept the baling twine, and for years he used it as the bookmark for his Bible. I love that man. David of the Bible also came to God. Listen to his cry in Psalm 51. Have mercy, mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness, loving kindness. According to the multitude of your tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. He pled for God's grace. Comparison number 5, their future. Both of these Davids have left us. The David I knew fell at work one morning. He tripped over a pallet and hit the ground with such force, he broke his neck. He was left paralyzed for just a few days, and then despite all of the attention he received from one of our nation's best hospitals, my friend David was gone at the age of 73. The David of the Bible also died. On the day of Pentecost in Acts 2, Peter said, David is both dead and was buried, and his tomb is with us this day. The Old Testament says that David slept with his fathers and was buried, and the time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 1 Kings 2, 10 and 11. He was 30 years old when he began to reign according to 2 Samuel 5, and he reigned 40 years. David of the Bible died at the age of 70. I miss my friend David Mays. I taught a Wednesday night Bible class, and I can tell you right where he sat. When I preached, I always knew right where to find him, up front and to my left. Today, without him, the church building is not as full as it once was, at least to me. It's kind of empty, and my heart is too. But that's okay. We'll get together again, and when that happens, we'll both get to spend some time with the David of the Bible. That's because we've been embraced by the grace of God Almighty. We've been blessed to shout the words of our memory verse from 1 Corinthians 15:10. But By the grace of God, I am what I am. God's mercy, God's love, and God's kindness, they can change your life too. And who knows, someone, somewhere, might just present your story as another trophy in the showcase of God's grace. And if that's the case, wouldn't that be simply incredible?
If you read your lesson this week, talking about Samson, talking about the showcase of grace, what do we know about Samson? What does his name mean? Sunshine, sunny. Does anybody think of Samson as being big smile on his face, happy, sunny, spreading sunshine? What was Samson? What was his personality? Did he kill anything? He was a bully. That's exactly what I thought, Sean, when I was reading about Samson this week. He was a bully. If he didn't get what he wanted, he let out his anger, right? Which he got what he wanted most of the time. When we read about him, he comes back and tells his father, he doesn't ask him about a wife, does he? He says, go get me that Philistine woman. I want her as my wife. Paraphrasing a little bit, but that's basically what he said. He was even bullying his father, right? Go get me that woman. Then you read about in Judges 14 and 15 that he made a riddle and told these Philistines, hey, if you he basically gambled here and told the Philistines, hey, if you solve this riddle, I'll give you so many garments, and 30, I think. But if you solve it, I'll give you 30. And so this Philistine wife that he took, the Philistines come and told her that to find out the riddle. So the wife betrayed him, and it made him mad. Oh, it made him mad. So he killed 30 people, took their garments and give them. He stood by his word, but he killed somebody, killed 30 people. And then because his dad thought that he didn't like his wife, his dad gave this Philistine wife to his best man at the funeral, at the wedding. Boy, that's going to come back on me. Yeah, sooner than I think. At the wedding. So when he finds out, what does he do? He gets angry again. And then he ties one of my favorite stories as a child, talking about being a bully, is he tied these foxes' tails together and set them on fire. Sean, we didn't do anything like that as young guys. Set the fox on fire, and they went across the Philistine village and burned down their fields. And so he was a hated man. He was an adulteress. It says he was avenging. Remember his relationship with Delilah, and that ended up being the end of him, right? Because she kept asking him, "What makes you strong? What makes you strong?" And he ended up telling her, and ended up being the death of him. But with all that past and that history we know about Samson, let's turn to Judges 16. Judges 16, verse 28 through 30. Judges 16, 28 through 30. Someone read that, please.
Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, please remember me, please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my two eyes. Samson grasped two middle pillars from the house ready, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on the one, his
Jeff, where did Samson's power come from? I think Jeff got it. He thought it come from his hair, right? Where did it come from? Did he realize it in these verses? Did he have faith that God would give him power? Did he give up? Well, I don't have hair. There's no way I can move these pillars. His eyes, he's blind, right? The Philistines had gouged out his eyes. He knew where his power come from, right? He had faith in God. He calls him Lord, literally meaning master, all in these 3 verses. He calls him God, meaning I am that I am. And he calls him God a 3rd time, meaning majestic and a respectful approach to God. Did Samson have faith in these verses? What do we know about Samson as far as Hebrews 11? Is he listed as a man of great faith? Do you think that had anything to do with his past, his anger, his avenging nature, or more about his future and where he was at the end of his life?
Samson had to, through his life of anger and bullying, he had to reach that humble state. He had to hit bottom, you might say, so that then he would come to God and realize that, it all depends on God.
Does it take us to get to our bottom before we realize who has power, before our faith is strengthened? Sometimes it takes that valley, right? How about Mary Magdalene? What do we know about Mary Magdalene when she's first introduced to us? She was possessed. She was not only possessed by one demon, she was possessed by how many? 7. So 7 in the Bible represents what? The number 7. Perfection. What else? Complete. So do you think Mary was full of demons? What would you picture Mary as if she was here today? She had 7 demons. She have control? Who has control of the demons? Satan. So is it fair to say that Mary, when we first read about her, that the devil had full control of her? So when Christ removed these demons from her, what do you think Mary felt? If you had 7 demons in you and Christ removed 7 demons from you, how would you feel?
Light and empty.
Empty? Free? How would you feel toward the man that freed you from these demons? Grateful? Thank you, Jesus. See you later. Indebted. Indebted. Grateful. Indebted. So how did Mary Magdalene feel? What do we know about her after the demons were removed? What do we read about Mary? She was the first and last to be with the body of Jesus. What else? How many of his disciples hung around when he was dying on the cross? Who do we know hung around? The apostle he loved. Wasn't the only one he loved, right? But who else? Y'all know this, surely. Who? His mother? Who else? Mary Magdalene. Why would she hang around? You think she loved this man? Think it had something to do with her past? Carolyn's right. She also was the first one to go to the tomb, right? She hung around the tomb. She was the first to see Jesus on that Sunday morning. Turn to John 20. We got 3 minutes. Turn to John 20. If you have the opportunity to, I don't know if you can look online. Maybe you can. If not, I can get you the lesson. Brother Dan Winkler had a lesson at Polishing the Pulpit. I believe it was titled The Great Day. It's a great lesson. Comes from this setting with Mary Magdalene here seeing Jesus. John 20, 11 through 16. Let's go to verse 13. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize that it was Jesus. "Woman," he said, "why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Think about the grace of God and Christ, where we're at when we get to the bottom. Why are we hurting? Why are we crying? Who are we looking for? We think we can do it on our own. We try to do it on our own until we hit bottom. And then we're looking for something. We hurt. We're crying. Who are you looking for, Mary? She was looking for Jesus. Who are we looking for? What are we looking for? We're looking, should be looking, for Jesus and grace. Thank you for your comments.